He was known as the Pablo Escobar of the Caribbean, a man who built an empire so vast that nearly all the cocaine hitting Puerto Rico was said to pass through his hands. His name carried fear, respect, and curiosity. To some, he was a ghost who couldn't be touched. To others, he was the most dangerous man alive. His name was Jose Figueroa Agosto. For years, he ran the streets like a king without a crown. Police chased him, governments hunted him, but he slipped through every net. He lived rich, reckless, and untouchable. Women, mansions, power. Agosto played the game at the highest level. But here's where his story twisted. Most drug lords end in blood or rot behind bars. Not him. His empire collapsed in scandal. From cartel boss to porn scandal, his fall shocked the world. This is the rise and downfall of Jose Figueroa Agosto. Jose Figueroa Agosto didn't come into this world with money or power. He was just another kid from San Juan, Puerto Rico. The kind of neighborhood where you either played it safe or you learned to survive fast. And Jose? He wasn't the type to sit back and wait for life to hand him anything. From young, he had that fire. The streets were noisy, crowded, full of hustlers making a living in any way they could. He watched, he listened, he studied. Some boys were happy chasing small jobs. Not him. He wanted more money, more respect, more control. He started small. Petty crimes, quick hustles, nothing big at first. But even then, people noticed how bold he was. He didn't scare easily. If there was a risk, he'd take it. If there was money on the table, he wanted the bigger cut. That's what separated him from the rest. By his late teens, Jose wasn't following anymore. He was running his own moves. And the timing couldn't have been better. In the 1990s, Puerto Rico was turning into one of the hottest spots for cocaine, moving from Colombia and the Dominican Republic straight into the U.S. It was a gold rush, and everyone wanted in. Jose found his lane. He built ties with Dominican suppliers, learned the routes, and figured out how to move products without getting caught. At first, it was just a few kilos here and there, but the money came fast. Cars, clothes, women, it all followed. And once he tasted that lifestyle, there was no turning back. By the time most kids his age were still stuck trying to find work, Jose had already made himself a name. People on the streets started whispering. This wasn't just another hustler. This was someone building something much bigger. Once Jose had his foot in the door, he didn't just step through. He kicked it wide open. Puerto Rico was a bridge between South America and the United States. And he understood that better than anyone. Planes, boats, even hidden compartments in cargo. It didn't matter. If cocaine was moving, he wanted control. He wasn't playing with street corners anymore. He was moving shipments so massive they could flood entire neighborhoods. With every deal, his pockets got heavier and his name grew louder. According to Wikipedia, some reports even claim that nearly 90% of the cocaine flowing through Puerto Rico was connected to him. 90%. Whether that number was exact or not, one thing was clear. His grip on the trade came from strategy, fear, and raw muscle all working together. But money wasn't the only thing he was stacking. Power came with it. Politicians, cops, business owners. Some he bought, others he scared into silence. That's how he built his shield. People knew his face, but no one dared to point fingers. Even when police tried to chase him, he was always 3 steps ahead. And then came the lifestyle. Flashy cars, designer clothes, women everywhere. He was a walking picture of success in the underworld. Mansions in the Dominican Republic, luxury trips, private parties. He lived like a superstar, not a street thug. To outsiders, he looked untouchable. To his people, he was a king. But with that power came enemies. Other traffickers wanted him gone. Authorities were desperate to catch him. And yet, somehow he stayed free. Every close call made him bolder. Every escape made him a legend. By the late 1990s, Jose wasn't just another player in the game. He was the game. Power in the drug game doesn't come cheap. You don't keep control of 90% of the cocaine in Puerto Rico by smiling and shaking hands. Jose knew that. He understood fear was just as valuable as money. If someone crossed him, they paid for it. Sometimes with their business. Sometimes with their lives. Word spread fast. Mess with Figueroa Agosto, and you wouldn't see tomorrow. That's how he kept people in line. Not just his rivals, but even his own crew. Loyalty wasn't a choice, it was survival. He had his network running smoothly. Drivers, pilots, middlemen, even people in uniform. Everyone had a role, and everyone got their cut. But it wasn't friendship holding all together. It was a quiet fear that Jose could take everything away in a heartbeat. That fear made him powerful. Police called him one of the most dangerous men in Puerto Rico. And they weren't exaggerating. He had the money to buy protection, and the ruthlessness to silence anyone who stood in his way. Politicians whispered his name behind closed doors. Reporters barely touched his story. He was too risky to speak about. And yet, the strange thing about Jose was how public he could be. He didn't always hide. He went to clubs. He showed off his cars. He lived like a man untouchable. That made him a ghost in plain sight. Authorities were hunting him. But every time they thought they had him cornered, he slipped away. By the late 90s and early 2000s, his reputation had spread beyond Puerto Rico. In the Dominican Republic, people feared him just as much. He wasn't just a local boss anymore. He was a Caribbean kingpin, and everyone knew it. But behind all that money and power, there was something else building: the pressure. The cops wanted him. Rivals wanted him. The game was closing in, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the walls started to crack. By the late 90s, the empire Jose Figueroa Agosto built was too loud to ignore. The money, the murders, the power, law enforcement couldn't let it slide forever. In 1999, he was convicted of murder in Puerto Rico and sentenced to 209 years in prison. For most men, that would have been the end of the story. But for Jose, it was only the beginning. He pulled off what many thought was impossible. Just a few years into his sentence, he escaped, slipped out of prison like a ghost, and vanished into the Caribbean. From that moment on, he wasn't just a kingpin. He was the most wanted fugitive in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And here's where it gets wild. He didn't hide in some jungle shack or underground bunker. He lived right in the open. Mansions in the Dominican Republic, luxury cars, high-end clubs. He even had fake IDs, new names, and a string of girlfriends who thought they were dating a wealthy businessman. He blended in, but at the same time, he flaunted it. That arrogance became part of his legend. Authorities chased him for more than a decade. Interpol, DA, local cops, everybody wanted his head. But he was slippery. He paid off the right people, changed identities when he needed to, and always seemed one step ahead. The media in the Dominican Republic nicknamed him Junior Capsula, because like a capsule, he was always sealed tight, hard to crack open. But the longer he stayed free, the more attention he drew. Rumors swirled about his connections, his wealth, and the women by his side. People whispered that this fugitive was living better than most politicians. And for a while, it looked like he might never be caught. Still, no fugitive stays untouchable forever. By 2010, the walls started closing in. His face was everywhere, and even his money couldn't keep the law away much longer. For over a decade, Jose lived like a king in the Dominican Republic. But arrogance has a way of catching up with you. By 2010, the pressure was boiling. Authorities have been tracking his movements, his lovers, even his cars. And when you're the most wanted man in the Caribbean, one slip is all it takes. That slip came on July 17, 2010. After years of being untouchable, Jose Figueroa Agosto was arrested in Puerto Rico's neighboring island, the Dominican Republic. The capture was headline news. Reporters flooded the streets. Cameras rolled. And the people who once whispered his name now shouted it. The King of Shadows was finally in chains. When they caught him, it wasn't just Jose they brought down. Investigators uncovered a web of corruption, fake passports, and piles of cash. He had been living under multiple identities, using forged documents to travel and blend in. Some of his girlfriends didn't even know who he really was until they saw his face on the evening news. The empire he built started crumbling fast. Associates either fled, got arrested, or turned on him. Money was seized. Properties were raided. What once looked like an unstoppable machine was now in pieces. In court, Jose faced a mountain of charges: drug trafficking, money laundering, identity fraud. Prosecutors painted him as the Caribbean's Pablo Escobar, the man who poisoned Puerto Rico with cocaine, while living like royalty. And this time, there was no escape. He pleaded guilty in 2012, and a year later, he was sentenced to 30 years in U.S. federal prison. It was a dramatic fall, from running an empire so powerful that even police hesitated to say his name out loud, to standing in front of a judge, just another prisoner in an orange jumpsuit. But what makes Jose's story different is that it didn't stop there. Most drug lords disappear into prison walls forever. Jose? His story took a left turn nobody saw coming. When most drug lords fall, the story ends the same way: prison bars, silence, and a slow fade into history. But Jose Figueroa Agosto? His ending wasn't so simple. After the dust of his trial settled, rumors started spreading. Not about more drugs, not about escape plans, but something far stranger. The man once feared as the Pablo Escobar of the Caribbean had turned his attention to porn. It sounded like a bad joke at first. How does a kingpin who ran billions in cocaine end up on the set of adult films? But reports trickled out. In the Dominican Republic, people whispered about tapes and photos that linked him to the adult industry. Some said it was part of his cover while he was hiding. Others believed it was a way to keep money flowing under the radar. Whatever the reason, the image of a man who once ran an empire now chasing cameras and adult stars was shocking. The irony was brutal. For years, Jose terrified his rivals. He bought politicians, he controlled shipments, he lived like royalty. And now, he was mocked. Tabloids ran with it. Headlines painted him as a fallen king. One who went from being the most wanted man in Puerto Rico to the punchline of late-night gossip. Some of his girlfriends later revealed that Jose was obsessed with recording everything: parties, private moments, even his own encounters. He liked being the star, not just the boss. Maybe that's why the leap into porn didn't feel so strange to him. Tio, the outside world. His downfall didn't look like the violent ending people had expected. He didn't go out in a hail of bullets like Pablo Escobar. Instead, his empire collapsed in courtrooms and newspaper headlines. The man who once ruled Puerto Rico's cocaine trade was suddenly reduced to an inmate number. Once feared, now mocked. His story was proof that power doesn't always end in blood. It can just as easily end in disgrace. In the end, Jose Figueroa Agosto's downfall shows us something simple but powerful. No matter how high someone rises through fear or crime, it all comes crashing down eventually. Power without principle is temporary. Money without meaning is empty. His journey reminds us to ask ourselves, what are we building, and will it last? If you found this story eye-opening, don't just stop here. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this aren't just history, they're warnings of the future.